Hello guys, this is Dark Fox Sage 2 and we are back with our new fanfic, which is What If Naruto Fell in Love with Konan Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and please subscribe to the channel. It motivates me to upload more fanfic like these for you all. Now let's start the fanfiction. Maybe I should get to know this boy, she thought as she turned her head to the blonde nin. Naruto-san. He replied back to her. His face was still cheeky, but it also had a look of interest as well. How long have I been in this infirmary? She answered not even a second later. Oh, you've been here, going on 3 days now. Naruto responded, answering his rhetorical question and hers. 3 days? Konan asked herself. She has been in Konoha for 3 days and no one has started a riot or a mob demanding total annihilation of the girl. She was an Akatsuki member. Didn't they want her dead? How is this possible? She asked in complete denial. The question caused an awkward look on Naruto as he turned sheepish and began rubbing the back of his head. Well, he started but then began fidgeting. The village doesn't know yet. Only a handful of people know you are actually here, but they can't tell anybody. Not until we know exactly what to do about the situation. He finished, gazing around the room. Was all she could say about that. It seemed as though her life was spared for the time being, but then another thought struck her. Nagato. The blue-haired girl whispered, receiving a look from Naruto who was clearing his ruminations. Huh? The blonde ninja asked as he didn't quite hear what she said. Nagato. Where's Nagato? Did you save him from Madara? She started back louder than ever. Naruto looked at her, then dropped his eyesight to the ground forlorn. Konan automatically knew what the answer was from the boy's gestures alone. Don't tell me, she asked the boy before it caused her to sink low on her bed and clench her fists. Damn it, she began, I had everything planned to defeat him. I was ready for whatever he threw at me, and I failed. Her voice began to quiver as she continued her rant. I went through so many scenarios in my head, I even calculated timing between tactics, and I couldn't even protect my best friend. Her voice cracked and tears began to well up in her eyes. She had worked hard to prevent the kidnapping of Nagato's body, but all she really achieved was knowing that she was too weak to protect her last friend from the clutches of darkness. Naruto looked at the girl plainly. A feeling of guilt washed over his body as he thought about what had previously occurred because he also failed at getting Nagato's body back. Just the thought made him want to beat himself up after causing another pain to someone. He then remembered what the older Uzumaki told him once Naruto received his Rinnegan. Take care of Konan for me. Blame me, the blonde Jinchuriki told the woman. She looked at him with widened eyes as he glared upon her. What? I was the one who let him get away with his body. I had a chance to save him and I blew it. His face showed signs of anger, but he still kept a serious tone. Hit me. He pointed to himself with his thumb and lowered his defenses in front of her. But I don't she started, but was immediately interrupted by Naruto. I said hit me. His eyes still gleamed with seriousness. Don't put the blame on yourself. Blame minestead. She slowly raised her hand and curled it into a fist as she thought about everything she hated. All of her loathing was going directly into her hand as she finally built up enough strength to hit the boy. Naruto braced for impact as Konan's fist came hurtling towards him. The blonde then shut his eyes, hoping that it wouldn't hurt, only to feel nothing. A few seconds passed as he slowly opened his eyes again. I can't do it, she replied in a hoarse whisper. I can't blame you for what happened. Her fist fell to her side as she lost all means to slaughter the boy. Lost for words, Naruto just stood there. Yet again, he didn't think that it would click to her as easily as it just did. Maybe he was underestimating her. If I told myself you did it, then I would be lying. Her gaze faltered back to her bed as she continued, it wasn't your fault. It was his. Madara's. Such distaste spewed from her mouth every time she talked about him. If words could kill, he would have died a million times over. Look, I'm sorry I can't bring him back, Naruto began, pacing around the room, but I will keep my promise to Nagato. I promise I will make peace with everyone and make people finally understand one another. I will become Hokage. Konan quit her self-loathing and curiously observed the boy. He turned to look at her, then gave her his trademark grin. She couldn't help but smile slightly at the young leaf nin before a certain Hokage came through the door along with Sakura. Tsunade gave her a once-over before speaking. I see you've made a full recovery. The blue-haired nin sized up the Godime as well before speaking and let her true emotions fade for the moment. I see you have as well, she said without much emphasis. Yes, well, I can handle my own, Tsunade continued, but I did not come here for idle chat. I came here for another reason altogether. Then why are you here, Granny? Naruto asked, slightly confused in the matter. I was just about to get to that, she said, gaining full attention of both Konan and Naruto. Her eyes then looked at the ex-Akatsuki. The reason I am here is to get you tested. We clearly can't have an enemy of Konoha living here without any clarification of non-malicious intent. Living here, Konan shouted abruptly. I didn't say I was joining the Leaf Village. Tsunade shot her an evil glare. You are in no position to argue. Naruto saved your life and brought you to this village, and it was because of him that I have decided to spare your existence as well. Konan threw her eyes to her bed and reflected silently, not really knowing what to say. I could just sign for your execution here and now and be done with you, but you could prove to be a valuable asset to this village, being as how you have trained under Jiraiya, who was one of the legendary Sannin, such as myself, and you are a former member of Akatsuki nonetheless. That is why, henceforth, you have been disregarded as the S-rank nuke nin you once were. You are now known as Konan of the Leaf with probation rights. Lady Tsunade, Sakura stated questioningly, is it really a good idea to enlist an Akatsuki as a Leaf nin? Tsunade turned her gaze to Naruto, who was staring at her with a slight smile, then turned her attention to Sakura. If Naruto believes in her, then it wouldn't hurt to give her a shot. I've already talked to the council and they have fully agreed to allow her stay as long as the probation is in effect. It wasn't easy though. The pink-haired girl looked at the Godime cautiously as a sign that she really didn't know if it was the right choice. Tsunade sighed and turned her view to the concerned medic nin. Don't worry, she whispered, I'm sure there is a good reason why Naruto wants to do this. She then looked at the blonde and switched to the blue-haired leaf nin, even if it doesn't make any sense. She finalized to Sakura before continuing her original response to Konan. There will be clothes sent to this room for you to change into. Afterwards, Anbu will arrive and you will immediately go to the interrogation chambers for your cross-examination to see if you're actually hiding something. Tsunade turned for the door and shifted her head to match eyes with Konan. God help you if you are. She then walked out of the room with Sakura trailing behind, taking her final glance as well before closing the door behind them. Konan slumped in her bed in defeat. It seemed she had no choice in the matter anymore about where she could go or what she could do. If she tried to escape in her current weakened state, she would only get caught and put to trial on instant treason. Things would not go well and it would only mean the end of her. Well, I believe you'll pass, no sweat. Naruto assured the new leaf nin with his wide smile. She looked at him and saw the warmness etched across his face. It caused her to barely smile again to the boy, and she couldn't understand it. There's something about him, something I can't describe. What is this feeling? She mused a couple of more seconds before Naruto started walking away. Naruto-san, where are you going? Oh, Naruto started. Well, Captain Yamato wanted to see me. He told me after I got done in the hospital, I should see him immediately. Oh, Konan silently added. There was obviously a hint of unease in her voice and the Jinchuriki noticed it. Don't worry, you'll do fine. You're not like the others and I can see that, Naruto added with a thumbs up before making his final leave. The door clicked softly as silence enveloped the room, leaving Konan alone on her bed to reflect. Ooh. Naruto hopped over a few buildings and darted through various people until he reached a single building on the other end of the construction mess on the opposite side of the village. It was dull in color and lacked any enthusiasm in the creativity department. It didn't have a door as it only had two flaps in front of the doorway slowly wafting in the breeze. It was probably used previously for medical treatment seeing as how it had stretchers laying around it and various other medical equipment. Now it was abandoned as Konoha had a hospital again. Well, this was where Captain Yamato wanted to see me. He replied to himself unenthusiastically. Naruto pushed the flap around his body as he made his way into the room. The room was a little stale and still looked messy with many needles and bandages lying around. The only thing that seemed new was the bodies of the ninja who occupied the building. Yamato noticed the boy and not too soon responded to his arrival. "Ah. I see you've made it." "Yo." Kakashi responded to the boy who only looked a little puzzled at the masked man's greeting. "Wait a minute. What's Kakashi-sensei doing here?" the blonde asked as Yamato walked over to the Jinchuriki. Kakashi looked at the boy, then at Yamato before he let out a smile underneath his mask. "Well, it's no big deal, but we heard from Lady Tsunade that Nagato did something to you before he died. We just want to make sure nothing affects the Kyuubi's final seal is all." "That's right, Naruto," Yamato stated. "Whatever he did to you could affect the seal and ultimately release the Kyuubi from its cage. That is why we have to check your body for anything abnormal." "Oh yeah," Naruto banged his hand in his other palm. "I haven't shown you yet, have I?" Yamato looked at Kakashi before the masked man spoke up to the blonde Jinchuriki. Shown us what?" Not long after that, Naruto concentrated for a second before he finally yelled out, "Rinnegan." The blonde's eyes shot open and revealed two purple circles replacing each iris. Both Yamato and Kakashi stifled a breath as they were taken aback at the sight of the new Rinnegan eyes that replaced Naruto's original sky blue eyes they had grown accustomed to. "Our Rinnegan," Kakashi started, "how did you?" "It was Nagato's final gift to me. As it turns out, he was my cousin," he replied happily before he remembered his death. It caused Naruto to downcast his eyes for the moment. "Naruto, this is unbelievable." Yamato looked deeper into the eyes of the new Rinnegan wielder. The purple gleamed in his irises from the light bulb on the ceiling. It wasn't a full Rinnegan yet, but it was still just as intimidating. "Kakashi, can you help me out here?" "Oh, yeah, sure thing." The masked man was still amazed at the sight, but lifted his Hitai to reveal his Sharingan. Naruto stood there for a few seconds before Kakashi spoke up again. "Well, it's not an illusion, there's nothing behind it. It's not a trap either, so, it's the real deal." The wood expert was dumb-stricken. This was actually the first time he got to see this type of eye up close, but turned to a more serious facade after he realized something. Yamato looked down then smiled slightly. "It seems the Uzumaki bloodline carries the Rinnegan after all." "Huh, what do you mean?" Kakashi brought up before receiving a look from Yamato. "Well, back when I was a Chunin, there was this rumor going around the adults that a Rinnegan user was actually found. I don't remember much, but the higher-ranked ninja also said something about the Uzumaki. I was young back then so I really didn't understand what they were talking about at the time, but now that I see Naruto here, the heir to the Uzumaki bloodline, I realize that both of those stories were actually one story." Kakashi thought coherently about it. "Oh yeah, I remember hearing about that too. That was a while ago though. I guess when they saw that Kushina didn't have it, they gave up the idea." "So, are you saying that I actually have a Kekkei Genkai?" Naruto asked as if he were a child getting candy. "Yes, it seems so," Yamato replied before giving a glance at the Jinchuriki. "All right, Naruto. Let's see if it alters your seal or not." Ooh. It was very quiet in the lone recovery room that Konan resided in. The Anbu already came to her room and gave her the clothes she was supposed to change into only a half-minute after Naruto left. They seemed to fit her perfectly, which kind of threw her off for the moment, but then she realized that her other clothes were missing so she assumed that they knew her sizes from them. She then walked into the small bathroom that was on the other side of her room. A sigh escaped her lips as she looked herself up and down in the bathroom-sized mirror. What was she wearing? How could she wear something like this? As if irony was taking a crack at her itself, she came dressed in something that seemed to humiliate her. The same outfit that many other ninja wore who tried to stop her, she dressed in as well. From head to toe she bore the greenish Junin vest with a black long-sleeved turtleneck shirt underneath that had the orange Uzumaki swirl on the left arm. She also wore the same black skin-tight pants that every other leaf ninja wore as well, bearing the shuriken pouch on her right thigh. Then to finish it off, her sandals were that of a black color as well, leaving no difference in color change to the outfit. I guess it's what I deserve, she replied woefully. Her gaze faltered as her eyelids lowered. Konan didn't think that she was worthy of these new clothes. Those who wore this vest obtained it through honorable means to their village. I shouldn't wear something like this. The clothes seemed to mock her and it pushed her into a further state of suppression to the past, making her leave the bathroom because she could not bear the sight of herself. The door opened not long after to her room as two Anbu appeared before her. Follow us, one of them ordered to the blue-haired leaf nin. She nodded silently and walked away with the two Black Ops members. Shortly later she found herself inside a small room with one table and two chairs. Two men were already inside the room and gave her a look of scorn. I see you are in Konoha. What are you doing here? The taller man asked the woman with a sneer. That only concerns me. It is none of your business, she replied in a dull tone. What did you say? The man responded back vehemently, picking her up by her Junin vest. I should kill you right now for all of the suffering that was spread across this entire village. Now Ebiki. We shouldn't do anything to harm this one, the other man shot back to the angry Junin. Besides, we will find out, soon enough, of her true intent. Oh yeah, that's right Inoichi. A slight chuckle escaped Ebiki's mouth, followed by a release of the woman. The blonde Yamanaka motioned for her to sit down after that little show. She sat in a chair opposite to the other man and stared unemotionally to the blonde Junin. Inoichi looked to her for a moment before he started to speak. All right, I'm going to have to put you to sleep before I can perform the procedure. Hopefully you will cooperate with me so there won't be any trouble. She shook her head in agreement before he started talking again. Okay, allow me to start, and not long after that, she unknowingly fell unconscious to a sleeping jutsu. Now, let's see what you're hiding, Inoichi stated as he placed his hand on top of her head. Flashback. Who is this and why is he even here? An 8-year-old Yahiko asked to the young girl about the same age. He's called Nagato. He looked so alone and pitiful outside that I told him to come live with us. Konan replied happily to the orange-haired boy. But he even brought a dog, sheesh. Nothing here, Inoichi thought as he read over her memories, but it seems Nagato and Konan are longtime friends. Let's go to another one. I'm staying. Jiraiya told his teammate Tsunade, who responded outraged. What? You can't be serious. Well, at least until they get on their feet. The younger Jiraiya shot back. Konan looked at the older man. She was a little worried about his stay, but he seemed to be real nice. In a way he almost seemed like a father figure, especially after they got used to him being around. Ooh, hop-in planks. What are those? Konan asked the white-haired sage. Oh, he started, well they're to show who's here and who's not by the side it has been flipped to. If it's red, it means you're here. If it's white, it means you have left and can hop in anytime. A grin etched across the leaf nin's face as he waited for the kids to get the pun, but that failed when the young girl asked another question. But why do we need these? Konan asked, uncertain of the uses it pertained. Well, this area is still dangerous and you'll never know when they will come here and try to attack us. The sage answered realistically. So, you're saying that if it's red, then one of us has probably been captured, and when one is white and we're all here, then that means there is an enemy disguised as one of us? She asked Jiraiya in a state of confused understanding. That's very inspective, Konan. Unlike a certain other, the sage eyed the orange-haired boy studiously. Hey, I knew what you were talking about, sort of. Yahiko retorted back. Nothing here either, but Jiraiya-sama taught them. Inoichi mentally disregarded the thought for now. Where are your darker thoughts? Why are you here? He then delved deeper into her mind. Kill me, Yahiko told Nagato with a definite voice. No, don't do it, Konan screamed to her Rinnegan-wielding partner at the top of her lungs. Nagato. The orange-haired man shouted to a stricken teammate. It seemed as though Nagato was in a difficult situation. He was given an ultimatum to either kill Yahiko or Konan gets killed by Hanzo. If you don't do it, this girl dies. Hanzo replied to the shaken red-headed Akatsuki. Not a split second later, a solid thud was heard as Yahiko impaled himself with Nagato's kunai. Both of you have to stay alive because you are the Messiah. Yahiko replied through pained breaths. I really believe you. And nothing more was ever said as Yahiko fell to the ground in one last dying breath. Yahiko! Konan shouted, but the man never answered or got up. A serious rage enveloped over Nagato as he lost all meaning within himself. Without a moment's haste, he began to slaughter everything in his path because nothing mattered anymore. It eventually led to a summoning that took the souls of everything his beast touched, causing the Rinnegan wielder to become paralyzed in the process by the rods that shot through his back. Nagato, a forlorn Konan called to the boy, but was ignored because of his insanity that consumed him. So, you were the real leader to begin with. Hanzo stated, crossing his arms to the crazed man before him, who knew you were the one who had the Rinnegan this whole time. Not long after that, Nagato screamed and forced his summon in the enemy's direction only to miss his opponent by shunshin. That's pretty tragic, the blonde Yamanaka thought to himself, now I see how they came to be. What a hard way to go through life. I still don't have what I need though, so I need to keep searching. And with that, he went even further into her memories. I knew you'd be here. Konan told the man full of hatred. So, I'm assuming you won't tell me where Nagato is? The swirling orange-masked man asked in a, thought so, voice. I've waited for a very long time to end you, Madara, the blue-haired girl answered back forcefully. Madara looked at the woman with a smirk under his mask. Just so you know, I won't go easy on you just because you were one of us. Oh, one question though, do you think Naruto Uzumaki is that special? He asked in a menacing voice. Konan did not falter as she pierced through the man's one-eye glare with her own. Naruto is the embodiment of light itself, that's why every time he meets somebody, they carry the flowers of hope. And with that, Konan threw a few paper shuriken at the form of Toby. Well, I may as well tell you a few things about your friends, before you come to your imminent death. He replied coldly to the girl as he went intangible, completely evading the shuriken. Konan fell surprised to his intangibility before he brought his point back up. First of all, I was the one who made Yahiko form Akatsuki. The blue-haired girl widened her eyes in disbelief. And second, I was the one who gave Nagato the Rinnegan. He concluded to the dumbfounded girl, so, really I just wanted to get my eyes back. But you were just a foolish girl who didn't know anything, but now, you know where Nagato's body is hidden, so I just need to detain you. All of this new information led into a fierce battle between the two Akatsuki as Konan did the paper angel technique to further her plans to see to his demise and failure. The altercation lasted for a very long time before it came to a screeching halt. Madara had somehow used a move that completely shut off his other eye underneath the broken orange mask in consequence, but this move allowed him to warp space and time to fuse reality and imagination. This attack caused Konan to be put in a deathly encounter with the masked man. He stabbed her in the back from behind with a pointed bamboo sword and pushed her off while he started talking again. There is no peace, there can be no hope. Nagato only wanted to feel better about his existence. Oh, but you'll see him soon enough, then you can spend all of eternity lamenting your decision to listen to Naruto's garbage. As soon as he said that, the endless rain that fell over Omegakure dissipated until it completely stopped. What's going on? It can't be. Madara stated out loud as his surprise seemed to arise in his words. The blue-haired ex-Akatsuki felt it as a sign and gathered enough will to continue. Yahiko's and Nagato's desire for peace has not left this world. I have faith in Naruto as well, because he will be the bridge to peace that everyone has desired, and I will be the pillar supporting that bridge. She then raised her arms to make one last attack on the broken masked man. It seemed as though Nagato's death made her make an important decision in her life. I don't care if I am blown away in the process. I will street. Before she could finish her sentence, a death grip was placed on her neck by the evil man. You didn't think I'd let you do something like that, did you? She could feel the life slowly fading from her body as Madara continued talking. I will wilt your flowers of hope and fade the bridge to oblivion. When I am finished with this jutsu, your life will be no more, but before I do that, you will show me where he lies. She dared to look into the man's eye as the jutsu took place. No, I can't, no. End flashbacks . No. She screamed out in the open, jolting both Ebiki and Inoichi. A small tear fell off of her cheek from the reoccurrence as she breathed heavily in nervousness. The Yamanaka immediately pulled his hand away as he remembered the memories of that final encounter and shook his head at the situation. What did you see? Ebiki asked the other man, who slowly got up from his seated position. She's clean, he answered solemnly, looking at the floor. As it turned out, Madara was behind everything. Ebiki face faulted at that statement. What? But I thought he was dead. I'm not sure, the blonde started, but I am positive that she wants to help us. Konan didn't say anything, but her facial features backed that statement, Inoichi proclaimed. Ebiki couldn't believe it. A former Akatsuki actually wanted to help for a change. It seemed to make him actually go a little easier on the woman. A rare sight indeed. Ebiki thought out loud. Well, since she passed, I guess we have to send her to the Hokage. She did tell us if the Akatsuki was approved to take her to her office. I suppose so, the blonde replied indifferently. Let's go. Konan got up from her seat and walked with the other two men who proceeded in front of her. Two Anbu guarded from behind, maintaining standard protocol. A short while later, they arrived at the Godime's office. She was assorting new files before her on the construction projects of Konoha. I'm assuming it went well. Tsunade asked in a rhetorical sense. Yes, Lady Hokage, Inoichi responded, and we also have information. Well, the Hokage started, what are you waiting for? Spit it out. Oh, right, well, it seems the man known as Madara is the one behind everything. Ebiki stated, causing Tsunade's eyes to widen in amazement. Right. Madara is also known as Tobi, the man in the orange mask, Inoichi followed up while closing his eyes and sighing. What? The man in the orange mask is Madara. Tsunade lost her words, but Madara should be dead. I said the same thing, Ebiki stated to the Hokage. Right. Well, I will let the others know. In the meantime, there is something I have to discuss with this woman. Yes, Lady Hokage. They both replied in unison before they left the office. The room seemed to quiet itself once the two women were in the office alone. Tsunade walked over to her window that overlooked the village and gazed out in silence. Konan felt it was not in her place to talk as she was technically the prisoner. There was nothing for her to say. She caused a lot of damage to the leaf and now they had somewhat captured her as a repayment to the village. It remained quiet for another moment or two before Tsunade began to speak. There were these three kids, not even old enough to live on their own. We were coming back from a mission and my partner noticed them. I didn't know what he saw in them, but he really wanted to teach them. He wanted to teach them how to protect each other. Konan listened to the story quietly as the Hokage continued. I didn't really think it was a good idea, but he saw something in those kids that I didn't at the time. So he left me and my other teammate to help these kids learn how to defend themselves. Tsunade's posture shifted to her other leg as she crossed her arms, still eyeing the village. Days turned into weeks until one day, I received mail from my partner. He wrote me a letter to keep me updated about his well-being. He would tell me how he was doing and ask me the same. But the longer he stayed away, the more he began to tell me about those kids. Eventually, whenever I received mail from him, that's all he would ever talk about. He would begin to go on and on about it in the letter that it would fill 5 pages or more. Conan's eyes widened slightly after hearing that, but she still said not a word. Those weeks turned into months and months turned into years until, finally, he returned home. When I saw him again, I was ecstatic. Everyone was happy upon his return. But when I looked at Jiraiya's face, I could tell something was wrong. Tsunade shifted her eyes onto the blue-haired Leaf Nin with a sense of sadness that seemed to radiate from them. It seemed those kids really grew on him. Konan couldn't deny it. Even though her emotions and past were buried from the long and arduous years of pain and fighting, she still had feelings. It seemed that she thought of Jiraiya as a father, although he wasn't there for very long. If anything, Jiraiya also thought of her as a daughter he never had, but he passed away after that fight with pain. Now, the only people who had personal ties to herself and Jiraiya were Naruto and Tsunade. Could I ask you one question? The Sennin asked to her only other companion in the room. After receiving a silent agreement from Konan, she continued. What made you change your mind about Naruto? Konan's throat seemed dry as if she couldn't say anything. She tried her best to clear her throat to speak. After a second, she began, because Nagato believed in Naruto, and if Nagato believed in him, then I will believe in him as well. I will support his will and well-being to ensure peace in this world. It is what Nagato and Jiraiya-sama would have wanted. The Hokage looked at her slightly pleased. That is what I wanted to hear. Tsunade then shifted her attention to her desk and opened a drawer. At first, I thought you were plotting something, but yesterday Naruto told me that he was the one who found you, so it's obvious that none of this was planned. She then pulled something rectangular from the drawer and began to look at it. It might be a while, but you may redeem your name just yet. And with that, the Godime threw the rectangular object toward the blue-haired ninja, who caught it with ease. The rectangular object was wrapped in a light, white silken material folded in an elegant manner. She pulled the folds apart and revealed something that took her breath away. A leaf hitai. It matched her clothes with a coal color, and the leaf metal forehead protector gleamed impeccably in the light, showing no scratches or signs of wear and tear. It was new. It was a fresh start, which was something that felt unreal to her. The headband caused a sad smile to creep across her face as she stared at it incredulously. Naruto is busy right now being checked over by his captain, so you will have to help the village rebuild instead, part of the council's orders, but the rest of your free time will be on something bigger. Your main objective, Tsunade tossed her eyesight over to Konan before she continued, is to protect and help Naruto master the Rinnegan. Konan didn't think too hard before she made a decision. Almost as if she was unaware she did it, Konan closed her eyes and wrapped the new hitai over her forehead. She then twisted the fabric tails into a knot and pulled forcefully. Afterwards, she opened her eyes to reveal a newfound determination. Yes, Lady Hokage. It looks like you're okay, Naruto, Yamato replied to the blonde Jinchuriki. As a matter of fact, it doesn't change anything at all. It's safe. Naruto lowered his mesh and orange-clad jacket, feeling a little happy that it was real. He actually owned a true Rinnegan and he never knew it. Hey, Captain Yamato. Yes, Naruto, the wood user asked amused. Do you know anything else about the Rinnegan? He questioned to the Junin. Yamato put his index finger to his chin as if deep in thought, then let out a sigh. I don't really know much else about it. We've never actually had one to study, so we don't really know anything. Sorry. Oh, Naruto sighed as he hopped to his feet from the medical table, then a thought struck him. Wait a sec. I think I know someone who knows a thing or two about it. Thanks Kakashi-sensei and Captain Yamato, but I have to run. He replied with a wave of his hand and dashed for the door. Naruto, Kakashi resounded in his mind, he just keeps getting stronger. Just like you wanted, sensei. His thoughts reminisced on the Yondaime as he watched Naruto's final moments in the room. Asterisk 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 8,888,888,888,888,888. Naruto jogged through the streets at a steady pace. It was a sunny day and people were still building away at the village. Since there was nothing left but the Hokage monument, they literally had to build a city from nothing. It didn't seem as much of a trouble to the villagers, for at least they were doing something to occupy their time. Naruto still received smiles from others as he passed by them. There would even be one or two girls around the same age as him that he would pass who, when he faced them, would turn their heads away and giggle. Since he never really saw what it felt like to be liked by another girl, it sort of creeped him out because he thought maybe they were planning something or making fun of him. Ignoring whoever and whatever, he continued. He was trying to reach the Hokage building because he wanted to see if Konan made it out fine. He wrapped around a newly built building and passed a few more people until he started hearing angry shouting and cursing. A few people seemed to be enraged about something as he gained ever nearer to the noise. It wasn't until he turned a corner that he saw a crowd of people arranged into an uneven circle. There seemed to be a fight that broke out and people were encouraging it by keeping it contained in the irregular shape. After listening on the fight for another second or two, he could make out a few phrases the people were saying. Kill the bitch. Why is she here? She stole a leaf ninja's clothes. Probably trying to sneak in. Go back to where you came from, demon. Naruto got a little worried for this person. Did they really hate whoever this much? She couldn't have done something too bad. After those thoughts ran through his mind, a small break formed in the mass of confusion that enveloped this character in just enough time so he could see who they were fighting. It wasn't a fight. No, it was far from it. This was attempted manslaughter. There were several people on this one person and there were even others trying to get their hits on the poor figure. Who were they thrashing on? It was someone who Naruto promised to protect. The person they were beating down was none other than the blue-haired ninja that he saved a few days ago. Konan. Anger boiled in the pit of his stomach as he saw the woman lying on her back getting hit in the face with a villager's fist and 3 or 4 others kicking her in her sides. It was a horrid sight to the blonde boy as feelings came back that he hadn't felt in a long while. Without really thinking, the Jinchuriki blazed through all of the people and threw a right-handed cross to the one attacking her face. This, in turn, sent the abuser flying several feet away from the circle and everyone else to stop what they were doing. Konan weakly looked up to the boy and saw the anger in his eyes, almost as identical as the last time, and Naruto. Does anybody else want to hit her? The blonde nin asked to anyone and everyone. All of the villagers stepped back a little at the sight of the Jinchuriki before they barraged him with an array of angry shouts. Why are you defending her? She's an Akatsuki. She doesn't belong here. She needs to be dead. Just like me, right? Naruto screamed as his head turned to one of the villagers, revealing his red vertically slit eyes. Shouldn't I be dead too? I am the Jinchuriki. The villagers stepped a few more paces back before the villager began to speak. Well, you don't want to harm us and we realize that, but that woman was in on the whole entire destruction of the village. But, people can change, right? An unknown voice said that came from behind Naruto and surprised everyone. To Naruto's relief, the village's ruler appeared behind the boy, causing the whole scene to emit peace. Granny. Naruto started but was cut off by the Godime. Don't worry, Naruto. I'll take it from here, she replied firmly. The villagers once again began an upheaval in noise, clearly in rejection to the blue-haired woman's presence. Tsunade listened with a half ear to what the villagers were saying before she raised her hand to clam them down. As soon as they pacified, she sighed softly. Look. I am sure all of you are upset about this new occurrence, but let me assure you. There is a perfect explanation for all of this. The villagers remained observant on the speaker. Naruto was looking over Konan and helping her stand on her feet. Yes, Tsunade continued, she was a member of Akatsuki, but she has been captured. Now you are probably also wondering why she is wearing normal leaf attire. A few people nodded as a sign of agreement. Well, the council and I have decided that, since she partook in the annihilation of the village, she should wear what many of our fellow ninja have worn to remind her of the past and her misdeeds that followed to the leaf's destruction. With that said, she will stay here and forever live her life in the shadow of the leaf, helping rebuild the village and whatever else we ask of her as penance for that sad day that fell upon our land. The Hokage looked over to the newly assigned leaf nin, who looked away as a sign of guilt crossed her features. She could see the sadness without having to really look too hard. All of the villagers seemed to take the Godime's statement at face value because a lot of them smiled viciously at the price the woman had to pay. That is why, from this moment forward, no one is to harm or maim this person because she will prove herself to be of worth, understand? She concluded with that and watched as the villagers grumbled and removed themselves from the area to continue what they were doing previously. There were a few villagers who still glared at the blue-haired ninja with distaste before they walked away as well, leaving only Tsunade, Konan, and Naruto alone. The female Sennin then took sight of the other two standing there. She went to say something but felt slightly dizzy, so she closed her eyes and heaved a sigh. Thanks, Granny, Naruto sighed as he gazed down at his feet. I know Naruto, she replied to him with a slight smile. Just be glad I was thinking about you, she stated before opening her eyes and turning to make her leave. It was never really clear who she was talking to in that statement, but before anyone could ask, she disappeared by Shunshin. A crossed look came over the boy's features, but only for a moment as he shook it off and looked at the ex-Akatsuki. Come on, Konan, Naruto told the blue-haired ninja with a smile, let's get you cleaned up. She looked over to the boy and reflected silently, thinking about everything that had just taken place. Naruto went out of his way to protect her again. He even went so far as to hit someone else in his own village, but was it for his promise or for something else? It seems he still has some buried feelings about his past, she thought quietly before taking his offer and following him. A little while later they reached Naruto's home. He pulled out a key from his pocket, unlocking his door and pushing it open to reveal the inside. It was nearly the same as last time except some odd and end things were lying on the floor. They both walked into the living room and Naruto helped his guest sit on the couch that overlooked the street. He left her alone for a moment and only a moment before he walked back in the room with a couple of rags and a bowl of warm water. He also carried a bottle of some unknown brand of ninja pills that was halfway filled and a roll of bandages. He sat down beside her and began to take a look at the damage. Her hair was a little disheveled and small cuts made their way onto her face. She also had a black eye and a small amount of blood was on her lip, which seemed to have left a trail on her face, but was dried over time. Why didn't you defend yourself? Naruto asked as he continued looking over her face. Well, violence is not always the answer. Also, I do believe that I would have serious repercussions if I touched anyone in your village. Killing someone on my first day is not a very good impression, is it? She replied nonchalantly, looking down. He laughed lightly at that. No, I guess not. He then went for the rag and began dipping it into the warm water. He pulled it up a few seconds later and immediately stopped. Wait a second. What in the hell am I doing? Then again, she hasn't said anything yet, so, I guess it's okay. The Jinchuriki sank the rag back into the lukewarm water, wrung it out and slowly inched his hand closer to her face. He came just a hair away from making contact with skin before a hand grabbed his wrist, knocking the warm rag to the young woman's lap. I can do this on my own. I do not need your assistance. She replied sharply with a facial reaction that matched. The only reason he got as far as he did was because she wasn't paying attention to him. Oh, sorry. Ha ha, he replied wryly. Now he felt like an idiot. Of course, she wouldn't let him do that, I should have known. She began to wipe her face with the rag softly, closing her eyes to the sensation it gave her. Naruto didn't really know what to do anymore, so he thought quietly to himself. Actually, he was thinking about the villagers and how they reacted to her. They hated her, loathed her, Wanted her dead. He couldn't help but remind himself about the way they used to act to him when he was younger. This feeling was something that he never wanted to experience again because for the longest time, he was the villagers' beacon of hate. Even through his academy years, people hated him. He thought the only way to get attention was to act out and become a nuisance. He did bad pranks and jokes all over the village. He even marked all over the Hokage monument, but people noticed him. It didn't matter how he got noticed back then, just as long as somebody was watching him. The only reason he ever got any friends was because he got stuck on a team with people who had to deal with him. They eventually realized not to judge a book by its cover and finally became friends with the boy. Years passed and finally everyone recognized Naruto as a person, not a demon. But now the villagers have someone new to hate. Someone to blame everything on. A new pariah, which was something Naruto had been previously. Maybe the same thing will happen to Konan. He thought in a sense of hopefulness, maybe people will see her like they see me now. He brooded silently a few more moments before a soft voice interrupted him. Naruto-san. Yeah? He asked curiously. The blonde was a little disappointed that he was cut short in his thoughts, but was willing to talk. There was something I have wanted to ask you ever since I have been here. She then stopped rubbing her face and looked at him with interest. How did you know Madara was after me? It's like you knew I was in danger. Well, he started while gripping his chin and closing his eyes as if deeply concentrating. I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? She asked him irately from his stupid answer. Hold on a second. Let me explain. He then positioned himself correctly on the couch, pushing his hands on his legs. A close of his eyes signified that he was deep in thought. Well, when I was home, something happened to me. I was watching the villagers rebuild their homes from this window. He pointed to the one behind the couch they were sitting on. Everything seemed fine and it felt like another day. Well, then I began to reminisce about the reveal of my true heritage and Nagato's death. Konan's attention was still laid upon the boy, keeping movements to a minimum as to not disturb his thought processes. Around that time, I started to look at the flowers you gave me and I started to feel sad. While I was doing that though, the flowers, they started wilting. But, origami cannot wilt. She rebuked, followed by a continuation of his explanation. Yeah, I know, that's what I thought too. I thought it was just a genjutsu you did to the flowers that make them seem realistic, but then, it got even weirder. Konan looked at him confused in the matter and silently urged him to resume. Seconds later, a sigh left his mouth and he spoke. After they wilted, they caught on fire. Caught on fire. She was taken aback at the statement. The blue-haired leaf nin didn't do any of that and felt like Naruto was just telling a lie to make it convincing, but then again, the way he spoke so calmly about it made him seem like he was telling the truth. Yeah, I don't really get it myself, but they did. I was a little worried about it and I didn't want to think anything more. But, the Jinchuriki then lowered his eyes to the floor. Then, I started to feel this pain. It was in my chest and, I felt like I was dying. But when this feeling continued, the only person that popped into my head was, you. It was like, I could feel your anguish and my thoughts were telling me you were in trouble, so I just dashed out of the village by myself and the feeling led me to you. He finalized with a smile. Konan thought for a moment. It was a lot to take in because stuff seemed to not add up. How could Naruto know she was in danger? His Rinnegan couldn't have been activated during the time, so a small grin appeared on her face as she came to a conclusion. Nagato did that. That seemed to confuse the poor boy. Huh? What do you mean? He's not alive anymore, so how could he do anything? Well, then he must have done something while he was alive. She responded as if trying to give him a clue. What could he have done? Naruto asked abruptly. The only time he could have done anything was, how could he not have seen this before? It should have been obvious, my awakening. Exactly, Konan answered with finality. It seems Nagato has passed his locator link to you. Locator link? What do you mean? The Jinchuriki asked. She then heaved a sigh. Nagato used a jutsu on all of his 6 paths to locate them whenever he needed them. By sealing a small amount of chakra into a certain part of the body on the person they want to connect with, the person in charge can submit a small chakra frequency producing a connection with the other person. In order for it to work though, the receiver had to have an antenna to cast and receive the signal, and the person giving the signal has to have one as well. It doesn't even matter how big it is. It could be the size of a hair and still do its job. You can't control a body with an antenna that small, but you can still locate whoever you're looking for. I was the only other person to have a locating link placed on my body, which was transmitted by my lip piercing. She then points to the small hole under her bottom lip, signaling that something was once there. The person doing the jutsu leaves a hint of their own chakra into the other person, so they can always find who they are looking for. It seemed Nagato transferred his chakra locators to you, and since I was the only other person to have his chakra link, you could feel me, but only me. More or less, you unknowingly activated this link while you thought about me. Oh, Naruto replied, scratching his head. I guess that makes sense, but still, how did I receive the signal? I don't have anything on my body. I have one place in mind, Konan said as she got closer to the boy. Naruto felt a little awkward from their shortened distance away from each other as she moved closer to the boy, but sort of shrugged it off for now. Turn your head for me please, she asked softly to him, who then received a turned head from the boy. She looked around the sides of his face, then grabbed his chin and quickly turned his head to gaze at his left temple. Naruto was bemused of her actions because he didn't really know what she was doing, but felt even more creeped out when she started touching his hair, moving it around softly with her fingers. Hey, what are you, Yao? Found it, Konan replied as her hand came around his face, unveiling a small shard. Very clever, Nagato. What is that? Looks like a splinter, Naruto told the girl quizzically. This is a chakra rod fragment. This is what Nagato used for you to find me, as in, the little antenna I mentioned earlier. Oh, Naruto mentioned, but it's so small. Konan seemed slightly amused at his reaction to this. Well, yes. Like I said, they can be as small as a hair, but it still does what the person wants it to. Naruto liked the idea. It was very smart to think of something like this, and it got him wanting to do the same. Hey, I should get one of those. Then if anyone ever gets in trouble, I can come in and save the day. You mean like the time that you saved me? The blue-haired Kunoichi asked, smiling at the end of her lips. Oh, Naruto blushed about her teasing question. Oh, well, I guess. He laughed slightly as he rubbed the back of his neck. Without any prior notice, Konan wrapped her arms around him again. This time, instead of sympathy, it was one that she needed and desired. Thank you, Naruto. A subtle tear began to descend its way down her face. It seemed she had more going on than he thought. She did so well to hide her emotions when they were in the hospital room that he never really noticed. That was when a melancholy mood placed itself on the house of Uzumaki Naruto. This was the third time he saw her cry, but this time Konan willingly hugged him. It was good to have a shoulder to cry on. Someone for emotional support. Of course, the factor of her being older and barely knowing the boy didn't really matter at the time because he was the only one she could do this to. He had the most tie to Nagato now, and she was in a village that hated her, so who else than the blonde nin that rescued her in the midst of her death? Naruto tried to collect his thoughts before he gently wrapped his arms around her as well. A smile overtook his lips as he began to speak happily to the woman. Don't worry. When I save this world from the never-ending pain, then you won't have to suffer anymore, because I will be Uzumaki Naruto. Hokage of Konohagakure. Naruto let go of his grip and stared at her with pure determination, pointing to his own chest with his thumb. I will make sure that everyone understands one another and peace lives across the land. It is my dream, my goal, my desire. If there is no way to peace, then I will find a way. Konan stared at the boy. She did misjudge him. Yes, his way of thinking about finding peace was childish, but somehow he keeps stepping closer to that ambition with hope, that smile. I understand now. That feeling I felt in the hospital, it was warmth. I have finally realized why Nagato trusts him. He truly is the light to this world. I have faith in you. Another smile graced her features as she wiped a stray tear from her eye, and I won't let anyone interfere. The will for peace has been passed down to you, and I promise on my life and on my friends' graves that I will protect that will and allow the bridge to peace to be built with only the strongest materials. The support that holds underneath will keep that bridge standing taller than all the land, so that nothing evil can ever reach its peak. I promise, Yahiko, Nagato. In that moment, they both looked at each other in a new light that only seemed unfeasible previously. On that day, a new friendship was born between the two which could possibly exceed every other's expectation. Was it fate that these two met? Did they share something that no one else had in the known universe? They seemed to know each other, if only slightly, and were willing to go out of each other's way to make this path to peace probable. It was a mutual feeling, an understanding. Maybe the universe intended this outcome and was correcting itself by allowing this abnormal charade to continue. This didn't seem real. It couldn't be real. But here they were, joined together by an unusual game of chance where the hand dealt in their favor. Maybe this could work. It was only planned from the beginning anyway. Naruto-san, let us begin your training, Konan said as she sat up from her seated position wrapping her arm in a bandage. Somehow, she felt a smidge happier from their little heart-to-heart moment. Oh yeah, Naruto shouted giddily, that's what I was gonna ask you today. Konan questioned the blonde, befuddled, ask what? Well, before I found you, I wanted to find someone to help me with the Rinnegan. Then I thought after a minute and realized you were the only person that was even remotely close to knowing anything about it. But after all of those things that happened today, I sort of forgot, he replied, rubbing the back of his head wryly. Yes, well, we are here now and we don't have much time to waste, Konan replied in a matter-of-fact tone. Madara far surpasses your strength and even my own, but we are about to change that. She then finished wrapping her arm and started walking towards the door. The blonde only stared at her, his gaze deep in space signifying that he was in thought. Naruto-san, Madara is nothing but pure darkness. You, on the other hand, are the child of prophecy. It is said that you will triumph victoriously and make things right in this world gone awry. She then turned to face him in a serious facade. By the time we are done with your training, he will never get his hands on you. I can guarantee it. That response actually lightened his mood a little. A small grin etched across his face as he thought about that aspect. He was actually going to be taught how to use the Rinnegan. It sort of felt strange to him now that he thought about it. He has a Kekkei Genkei, a special eye that her friend once had. Now that friend is no more, which makes Naruto the new heir to the special power he now possesses. Okay, Konan-chan, I'm ready, Naruto replied cheerily. The blue-haired woman looked at him and her features dropped into a frown. Don't call me that. Huh, he asked a little confused. You are never to put Chan at the end of my name. Understand? She told him in an angry voice, just because we have to train together for your benefit, that does not mean that we are best friends. But I thought. Well, you thought wrong, she replied with no hesitation. Now let's get going. We do not have much time. She then proceeded out of the door in sort of a hurry. Naruto tried to think as he couldn't figure out what just happened. What is wrong with her? 1 minute we're friendly, the next, she is staring daggers at me. I don't get it. He concentrated for another second or so before he concluded that it would come to him sooner or later. Naruto then followed behind Konan to begin his very first training lesson of the Rinnegan. Another day as the Hokage unfurls, Tsunade replied out in the open at her office desk, it never ceases to amaze me. Tsunade was very annoyed as of late. She had just gotten out of a coma and the work already piled itself to the ceiling as if it was trying to get her mad on purpose. She had to deal with the unexpected arrival of a former Akatsuki member, which was proving to be more trouble than it was actually worth, but could potentially work into a huge advantage if handled correctly. She had to go through council just to even instate Konan as a leaf ninja. But if the blue-haired woman was willing to help Naruto in any way she could and Naruto felt it best, then there didn't seem to be any reason why she shouldn't do this for her, even if the Hokage didn't want to. It was the way Konan acted towards Tsunade that really tipped the scales in the ex-Akatsuki's favor. The Godime could read people very well, that it was almost a talent because she could pick up an subtle gesture or voice change very easily, just like the third Hokage. That was something that only interrogators were good at. Maybe she should have been a cross-examiner. Easier than being Hokage, she thought with a sigh. She then thought about the blue-haired woman that came in earlier. When she looked at Konan, the look in her eyes and the way she spoke, it was as if she was speaking to another person entirely, if that makes sense. Tsunade could see the loneliness in Konan's eyes, in which her voice didn't betray that emotion at all. Of course, Konan was trying to hide it and doing a good job nonetheless, but that didn't really matter because the Hokage could see straight through the mask that the paper user held onto for a false sense of comfort. Tsunade could see her sadness, oh too well. Konan was the last one from the trio that trained under Jiraiya all those years ago, and now that all of her friends were deceased, there was no one else there to help the paper user get over her grief. The Sannin felt a little sad for the woman even though she helped in the village's total annihilation. But now that Naruto is around her in the village, maybe he will find a friend in Konan and help her. She seemed to hold Naruto in high regard. I think he's safe for now. While in the middle of her thoughts, Yamato and Kakashi appeared in the Godime's office with a poof of smoke, completely disrupting her ruminations. Tsunade looked over in their direction and put a knowing look upon her face. Well, what did you find out? She then intertwined her fingers and laid her elbows on the table, resting her chin on her hands. Right, Yamato replied firmly. Well, we were a little startled at first when we saw it, but the tests came back negative. His eyes are real. Yes, it seems Naruto has acquired the true Rinnegan, Kakashi stated seriously. We do not know what to do about the situation, although we do know that it does not have any effect on the last seal containing the Kyuubi. Well, at least there is some good news. Good to know Nagato didn't do anything to him, Tsunade responded with a sense of finality. I found it very odd though. Kakashi started again after a minute's silence. Naruto only has 2 rings on his eyes, but if I remember correctly, the Rinnegan has always covered the entire eye. I've done some research while we were fighting pain and it says that the Rinnegan covers the whole eye, but Naruto's only goes so far as to cover the irises. Tsunade looked to the ninja, intrigued by his findings. You do make an interesting point. That is why I would like to continue testing him for further evaluation, Yamato answered without a moment's haste. Things seem a little confusing. And for that reason, I want to make sure nothing happens. Tsunade nodded her head in approval. Right. You have my permission to continue watching him for any unusual occurrences, as it would deem unfortunate if something were to happen to Naruto, the Hokage sternly replied. Something was fishy, as things did not definitely add up. What could it be? What was Nagato's purpose? Kakashi then let his eye wander until a hint of blue piqued his interest on the Hokage's desk. There was a folder that was left open, revealing a sizable document and a photo of a person on top. Oh, doing a last-minute Akatsuki report. Kakashi's eye lingered a little longer between the front page and picture before noticing something out of the ordinary. Wait a minute. Is she? That's right, Kakashi, the Godime interrupted. She is a Leaf Junin. What? Yamato asked before he looked at the photo with the silver-haired Junin. All he heard was, Akatsuki, she, and, Leaf Junin. He really wasn't expecting what he saw. You can't be serious. Tsunade looked at the document as well before heaving a soft sigh. Look, Naruto was the one who found her. He seemed to trust her after finding out that Nagato was his cousin, and also, she has no ill will towards Naruto because we had Inoichi look into her mind and come up with nothing. Kakashi and Yamato stared in though as the Sannin continued, I already know what you are thinking. When I first heard that Naruto brought her here, I thought the same thing. I really just wanted to leave here for dead, but Naruto. He had a sense that something was there that no one was seeing. That idiot. He thinks he know everything. A smile graced her lips as she kept the speech moving. It wasn't until I actually saw her today that I changed my mind. Yamato felt the need to speak after a moment of silence, curious as to what the woman had to say. Well, what made you change your mind? Tsunade looked at the picture again, and then looked at both of the Junin with her smile fading into a sad one. Naruto did. His attitude about everything. Maybe he felt obligated to protect Konan, since Pain, or Nagato rather, told him that he was his cousin. I do not know. You really wish the better for Naruto, don't you, Lady Tsunade? Kakashi asked in a semi-sorrowful voice, but his stature proved he was sympathetic as well. Yes, but I also know Konan can really help him with his training. She is THW only one that really knows anything about the Rinnegan, and plus, on top of that, she seems to trust Naruto to a degree. Tsunade then moved her arms to the desk and turned her eyes to the table as well. What was real strange though was while we were in discussion about it with the Junin leader and the council, Danzo didn't even raise an argument. Actually, he and I were the only ones in full support of the instatement. That only makes me curious as to what he was thinking. I see your point, Kakashi stated as he turned his head to the wood user. Yamato then nodded in acceptance. I guess we really can't disobey the Hokage's decree. Nope, Tsunade replied cheekily, changing her mood in an instant, and that is one reason why I love being Hokage. Yamato was slightly taken aback before he nodded his head again. Yes, Lady Hokage, then I will keep you updated with Naruto. Goodbye. He then did a shunshin, leaving Kakashi and Tsunade in the room alone. Once things died down, Kakashi looked at the Godime and turned his head to the door. Well, since you don't need me for anything, I might as well make my leave. Actually, Tsunade started, I do need your assistance. That made the silver-haired Junin stop in his tracks. Oh. Yes, I need you to keep an eye on Naruto and Konan for me, she replied, getting up from her chair, but wobbled just a bit after another faint spell washed over her. The coma's after effects were getting to her. So, you don't trust Konan after all, Kakashi replied in an aha tone. The slug summoner sighed in defeat. You're right. We can't fully trust her. Not just yet anyway. She was an Akatsuki member and a person who killed innocent shinobi without thinking twice. But, I do not want you doing anything that could interfere with Naruto's training, so just keep an eye on them and make sure nothing happens. Yes, Lady Tsunade, Kakashi replied lazily. And also, it was around 3 o'clock once Konan and Naruto reached the newly made training grounds. The heat was sweltering as it was the hottest time of the day, but that didn't really matter to the Leaf Village. People from Konoha were used to the heat and were still as adamant to continue building their village. Once Naruto showed her to the place he usually trains, she had to stop for a minute to take a breath, laying her weight on a new practice log by her arm. Just coming from the hospital the very same day and doing something like this was risky, but she felt like she had no choice. They would never get anything done in time if she didn't try to pack as much as needed into the lesson. Naruto looked at her anxiously for a few seconds before he grew impatient. Finally, after waiting a little longer, her spoke up, well, what are we going to learn? Konan gazed at the boy before a frown took her face again. Patience is a virtue. That is what usually gets shinobi killed, is the recklessness that comes from eagerness. You should know that. Anyway, while you are standing there doing nothing, activate your Rinnegan. Naruto grumbled at the order he received from the blue-haired Junin and reluctantly activated his Rinnegan in front of her, displaying 2 purple rings on each iris. That is when she pushed herself off of the log and walked over to Naruto, stopping about 10 feet away. Okay, Naruto-san. Right now, I am your superior. I have listened, watched, and helped Nagato create and perfect his jutsu and skills, so listen closely because I will only say this once, Konan stated, gaining the full attention of the only blonde there. Now that you have acquired the Rinnegan, there are certain abilities that have been added to your skill repertoire. It also means you have gained an upper hand in learning new jutsu as they will somehow become easier for you to learn. Naruto listened intently as the young woman continued. I am sure you are aware of the Bansho Tenin and the Shinra Tensei from your fight with Nagato's Diva Path. Konan asked before she received an agreement from Naruto. Well, those two techniques come with the Kekkei Genkai, just like, in example, how the Mangekyo Sharingan comes with the ability of Amaterasu. Naruto did not know what that was and held his question about Amaterasu until later because he didn't want to interrupt the woman. Both moves are able to control the gravity that keeps us on the ground. Konan continues, to go more in depth, Bansho Tenin is the ability to pull any object towards you at your own free will by channeling your chakra through your hands. The chakra that is in your hands compresses until it creates its own gravity field in a small circumference inside your palm. The compression is so compact that it is generally invisible to the naked eye, which explains why you can't see it. This compression phase is also the reason why there is a 5-second window in both techniques. Anyway, wherever you point your hand while doing this attack, it will automatically be tugged to the source of the force. Depending on how much chakra you compress, the farther or heavier the object you can pull towards you. Oh, okay, Naruto replied with a sense of unusual understanding. Shinra Tensei, on the other hand, is similar to the Bansho Tenin except it repels anything by gravity using the controlled chakra from your hands. To do this, you need to pressurize the gravity compression from Bansho Tenin to a degree to where it becomes unstable. That is when the gravity becomes unbalanced in your palm and it erupts into an explosion, causing a gravity expulsion away from your palm. She gave hand gestures to further explain the process. To do this move requires chakra control in the entire body as it could prove fatal if your chakra explodes without synchronization. Your body has to be in sync for the impact of the expulsion to not affect it. Also, in order to do the full Shinra Tensei, you have to cast both arms outward and expel gravity from both hands simultaneously. If done correctly, it will create a barrier of disrupted gravity around your body, completely shielding you from any attack, just like what the Diva Path used. Konan let Naruto sink that information in for a second before she continued. She was surprised at his level of awareness but quickly realized that his Rinnegan was activated, so she shrugged it off with indifference. Now, we shall give you a little practice, the Junin replied while picking up a random stick off of the ground. It was about a foot long, 1 centimeter in diameter, and weighed no more than an ounce or two. She then threw the stick about 30 feet away from Naruto, who watched in interest. Now, since you already have a jutsu that is similar to this technique in a way, it will make things a little easier. What I want you to do is hold out your hand, aim it at the stick, and concentrate. Imagine your chakra as if you were making a Rasengan without making one, but keep compressing it in your hand until you can't see it. Then, once you do that, concentrate on the stick and imagine it coming to you. What? Naruto asked in a shocked manner. How am I supposed to do that? It's hard enough to make a Rasengan as it is, so how can I compress the chakra into nothing? Just think. Konan replied in a nonchalant tone, you have the Rinnegan, so it shouldn't be that hard. The Jinchuriki thought for a second before he realized what the woman was talking about. Then, with a simple sigh, he raised his right hand and began to concentrate on the stick. He thought about making the Rasengan and compressed it until it became invisible in his mind. Once he did that, he concentrated hard on the stick, trying to imagine that it was coming to him. A few moments passed and then a few minutes passed until Naruto realized nothing was happening. Konan-san, it's not working. Konan looked at him annoyed and spoke, it worked for Nagato, so I don't see why it shouldn't work for you. It was easy to him. He did it on his first try. Well, sorry for not being as good as my cousin, Naruto replied heatedly, still holding out his hand. You think it's just easy to grab something without using your hands? Fine. I will just concentrate on the stick right now because it is just so easy. He then turned his eyesight to the stick and began sarcastically mimicking the pattern to grab it. That caused the blue-haired woman to shake her head, so I pretend to have a Rasengan and then imagine the stick coming to me. Ha, like that. CHK. A soft pat on his palm interrupted his rant as his gaze faltered to his hand. To his amazement, the stick that he couldn't get just a second ago happened to be ATUCK on his right hand like super glue. What the? How? See. Easy. Konan replied with a self-satisfying stare. But, why couldn't I grab it just a second ago? The blonde asked in befuddlement. You weren't concentrating with your eyes, the Junin replied with a sigh as the stick fell from Naruto's hand, you were concentrating with your mind. The Rinnegan is what makes the stick move, not your mind. Oh, well, why didn't you say that before? The boy asked irritated because he looked like an idiot. Konan scoffed at him, I thought you already knew that. Either way, let's try it again so you get the idea of how the move works. Naruto grumbled more to himself as the paper user picked up the same stick and threw it 100 yards, making its way into the forest. Now, Konan began, you will use the same move you did previously but at a farther distance away. Concentrate with your eyes and aim your hand to the direction I threw the stick. Alright, the Jinchuriki replied as he began to concentrate on the piece of wood. His arm aimed at the stick intently waiting on its arrival. His concentration made him lose his awareness as he only thought of bringing the stick into his grasp. It was as if it was just him and the wood he was trying to grab was there. After another moment, right before he was about to give up, a shuffle of leaves attracted his attention and something shot out of the woods as fast as a bullet. It came straight at Naruto, whose surprise was short-lived as the stick came to his hand and abruptly stopped, encountering resistance. Once again, it wasn't as hard as he thought it was. It's almost as if the Rinnegan tells him how much chakra to use, Konan thought quietly while she watched Naruto laugh in excitement. It was roughly 6 o'clock in the evening when Naruto and Konan decided to call it a day. She was training herself rather lightly in her jutsu while simultaneously helping Naruto refine his stick-grabbing skills and eventually moved it up to logs roughly 6 inches in diameter and 2 feet long. Konan was impressed while unimpressed at the same time. She knew the Rinnegan helped the user master any type of jutsu, but she didn't really think it was also easier to master the gravity moves. He seemed to get the idea pretty quickly and it didn't even seem like he was tired. That moves consumes a pretty good bit of chakra and he has been doing it for the last 3 hours, but then she thought about the boy's chakra and ignored her amazement upon the fact. While walking away from the training grounds, Naruto heard a low growl from his stomach and laughed with a wry smile. Well, I'm hungry now. Ha ha, Konan-san, do you want to get something to eat? Konan glanced at him, a little interested in his request. I guess I am famished as well. I don't know anything about this place, so you should show the way. Naruto nodded with a slight smile. There's only one place I know where you won't be rejected from. That statement caused her to drop her head a bit. She just remembered that the village hates her. The only problem with this was the fact that she couldn't escape the situation. There was no way out and it almost scared her. Strange. Why does that scare me? She asked herself in silence. She hasn't been scared of anything since she was a kid and now the feelings roared its way to the surface, even if it was miniature in her state of mind. Don't worry about it, Konan-san, Naruto told her, which brought her head up in confusion. Did Naruto know what she was thinking? They are nice people and I don't think they will judge you as quickly as you think they will. Konan widened her eyes about Naruto's reply. No, it wasn't what she was thinking, but it did make her feel a little happier once she realized there was still one person around who didn't loathe her. A slight smile overcame her face, knowing that, in a way, she still had a tie to Nagato. Alright. Naruto-san. It had taken a few minutes to reach the building. It was none other than the famous Ichiraku ramen stand that Naruto had grown accustomed to going to on a daily basis. They had just opened up today and Naruto was getting rather tired of cup ramen. Sure, he ate a little of the homemade foods that stacked in his home, but most of it couldn't fit in his refrigerator, so he had to throw the rest out. Once he pulled over the flap to let himself inside, a young woman greeted him with a cheerful voice. Oh, hey, Naruto. It looks like you received our message today. Welcome to the new and improved Ichiraku. Naruto grinned at her response and looked around the store and noticed things completely redecorated. It carried the traditional counter seats that people ate from, but everything from the back looked as if it cost a lot of money. New fryers, stoves, and other hardware to cook were littered all over the back of the restaurant. It made Naruto a little happy for the Ichirakus. Thanks, Ayame-chan. Naruto beamed to the young brown-haired woman. I have someone with me today, so you can put their order on my tab. That's a first, Ayame replied cheekily, laying her arms on the counter. Who is it? Are you actually going on a date? Naruto blushed about that statement and rubbed the back of his neck. Nah. Nothing like that. She's just a friend of mine. So, it is a girl. Well, where is she? The young Ichiraku asked the blonde anxiously. I want to know who you brought with you. Okay, well, I will bring her in then, Naruto replied before motioning his hand, signaling the other person can enter. Naruto opened a flap for the blue-haired woman who entered with caution. Konan looked at the brown-haired woman who looked into her eye as well. It was sorta of nerve-grueling because the paper user did not know whether or not to speak. She was unsure if what Naruto said was true, about how the stand would not discriminate. Ayame gazed at her, until finally, a happy smile overtook her features. Hello, welcome to Ichiraku Ramen. Konan stopped for a brief minute for surprise to subside before she returned the greeting and sat down on a stool. Thank you, I will be glad to eat here. Two other people in the stand noticed the paper user's presence and left with a rain check, going out with a look of contempt upon their faces when they looked in the paper user's direction. That didn't go unnoticed by her nor the blonde Jinchuriki. Did I hear Naruto come in? An older voice called from the back to Ayame. An aged man walked into the front of the store carrying a towel wiping his hands thoroughly. His hair grayed with age and an apron wrapped on his body. It was none other than Tyuki Ichiraku. His face lit up in delight once he saw the young blonde sitting on a stool with a foxy grin. So it is you. Been a while hasn't it? Tyuki asked the Jinchuriki with warmth. It sure hasn't, you know what I want. Naruto replied with an enormous smile plastered on his face. Yeah, the usual. The older man replied with a similar smirk, until he noticed the other presence in the room. And who is this pretty young woman? You flatter me saying such things, but my name is Konan, the blue-haired Junin replied with a slight smile at the end of her lips. Well, that's a lovely name, the older man replied with sweetness, and what will you be having? Konan didn't really know what to eat. She wasn't a big fan of ramen for personal reasons, but she couldn't decline Naruto's offer. Plus, on top of that, this was really the only place she could go to eat without having to worry about discrimination so far. Earlier, when they were walking to the ramen stand, they both passed a few restaurants with people inside who noticed the blue-haired woman walking by and the managers of the restaurant passed evil glares toward her direction. They were stares of killer intent. They meant that she could not go there and the owners were not willing to negotiate. Breaking from her ruminations, the Junin looked up with concern before it disappeared in a flash. I would like today's special, please. Coming right up. Ayame, you know the drill. Tyuki replied with a smile. Yes sir. Right away, the young Ichiraku replied before going to the back and preparing the food. Tyuki looked at the two ninja before him and replied, your food will be ready shortly. Thanks. I'm starved. Naruto replied before the older man returned to the back and helped his daughter. Things got quiet for a minute as no one talked or brought up anything. Naruto and Konan were sort of in their own little worlds, reflecting on the past and wondering about the future. It wasn't until Naruto decided to say something that made tension fall from the little stand. Sue, you are a wind nature too. That response seemed to stop Konan's reflecting and she turned to eye him. How could you guess that? Well, Naruto started again. I saw you practicing your origami attacks while I was working on Bansho Tenon and I noticed that all of your techniques have wind attributes. I never really knew that about you. Yes, While you did not see the full extent of my power because of my condition, I do indeed carry the Fudan affinity. Although, I am surprised you would bring up something like that, Konan replied calmly, averting her attention back to the counter. Naruto didn't really have to think twice about that statement. I brought it up because I have the Fudan nature too. You do? The blue-haired woman asked in a bit of shock. Naruto looked at her a little puzzled and lowered his voice to a whisper, you didn't know? I thought all Akatsuki knew about their enemy. While that may be true, Konan replied, shifting her eyes back to the counter, information came rather slowly in our organization. I think the only time we actually found out about your affinity was when you fought Nagato's Diva Path. Heh, I guess that's why I still overpowered Nagato, Naruto replied with a foxy grin. Possibly, but I do have one question, the paper user brought up, how does the Rasenshuriken work? I heard Nagato commenting about it while you were fighting his Diva Path. He said something about it involving wind and it seemed to annoy him, so it must have been a rather powerful jutsu. Well, it is a jutsu I worked on while I was in MT. Mayuboku, Naruto began while gaining the interest of the woman to his right. Basically, I create a Rasengan with another clone helping me mold the chakra. Then afterwards, I begin using my wind nature to encase the Rasengan with wind chakra. Once I do that, I push more wind chakra into the move until the wind blades start increasing in size and rotation. Then once it's ready, I just throw it and watch the fireworks. That sounds complicated and difficult, Konan replied with an odd look of awe. Naruto smiled at her again. Yeah, I mean, I trained a very long time to do that, but the move is still not perfected though. What do you mean, not perfected? That seems like a move all to its own. How can something that strong not be completed? Konan replied with a look of irritation. Well, the blonde spoke after a few seconds of thinking. Before I left the hospital for my checkup after my fight with Nagato, they did a scan on me and told me that every time I do that move, it affects my cells to a point where I lose a day of my life every time I use it. It's sort of an issue with that technique. Konan sunk her head a little low after hearing that. It seemed the lifespan problem was universal to every shinobi. It only made her think of her friend even more than she wanted to. I believe you can do it, the blue-haired woman replied hoarsely. Huh, Naruto replied. He could barely make out what she said. I really think you can achieve that feat, Konan replied louder with confidence. You have such a huge advantage already by bearing the Rinnegan. If anything, I want to help you with your attack if I can. Naruto thought about it for a second. Another moment passed by before a grin crept across his face. Sure. I'd like that, and who knows, maybe I will teach you how to use it. It was really confusing to Konan now. Naruto seemed to really trust her for him to explain how to do a move like that and even offer to teach it to her no less. But to have someone put full trust in her in only 6 days after their original encounter was a little strange. It was almost like a role reversal with someone she once knew. I knew you'd be here, a voice replied out of nowhere. Naruto turned to look at who was talking and saw a silver-haired, mask-bearing Junin behind him. Kakashi-sensei, what are you doing here? What? Can't I just drop by to say hey to a student of mine? Kakashi replied innocently, looking at the blonde. Naruto glared unsatisfied at the Junin, but you already met me today, so this time has to be something else. Kakashi looked over to the Jinchuriki and wandered his eye over to Konan, who was looking back at him with interest on her face. They seemed to be doing fine. Nothing unusual. So, this is the new recruit. I'm assuming you already know my name and I already know yours, so no reason for introductions is there? He replied with a masked smile. I guess not, but would prefer if we reintroduced ourselves, now that we are on the same footing, the blue-haired woman replied with nonchalance. Kakashi changed his look of happened into interest as he saw Konan reach her hand out in a greeting gesture. Hello, my name is Konan and I am a Leaf Junin. What is yours? The silver-haired man looked at her hand for a second before he let out a smile and grabbed her hand with a friendly handshake. My name is Kakashi. Nice to meet you, Konan of the Leaf. I think we will get along just fine. Just as long as you don't get any funny ideas. So Kakashi-sensei, why are you here? Naruto asked, clearly annoyed by the man's disregard of the blonde's question earlier. Huh, Kakashi replied in confusion, I thought I already told you. I like to visit my stew. That's a load of crap and you know it. Naruto screamed with self-righteousness. Kakashi thought for a second, shifting his body position from one leg to the other, then let out an eye smile, it's the truth. If I came here for anything important, you would be the first to know. Well, Naruto replied in defeat, alright. It was nice to see you too, I guess. That wasn't so hard, was it? Kakashi replied with a smile in his eye, now, I have things to attend to, so I will have to talk to you later. He then looked over to the blue-haired woman and gave her an eye smile as well, later, Konan of the Leaf. And with that, he started walking away from the two, lifting the flap over his head. He abruptly stopped after the flap left his silver hair and poked his head back in between the flaps. Oh, by the way, both of you are to live together in Naruto's flat. Tsunade's orders. Kakashi then did a shunshin, leaving the couple alone in the restaurant. There was an absolute silence that encased the whole stand, leaving nothing to make a sound. Alright guys. Naruto's usual and today's special. Ayame replied, placing their orders on the counter with a smile. The brown-haired girl opened her eyes shortly after and looked at both of the Sadatou-esque figures standing in the lone stand. Hello. Was morning time for the Jinchuriki and the paper user. Dew began to slowly evaporate from the leaves and the birds chirped their songs in the wind that started the new day. The two ninja didn't really have the best night the night before because of some unusual living arrangements that had to be enforced. As it turned out, Konan had to live with Naruto in his flat and that caused a lot of awkwardness to ensue. Konan didn't really mind the living arrangements because she would rather have a bed to sleep in than a cot in a tent like other ninja had to suffice with. Naruto on the other hand was in rejection to the arrangements and even ran down to the new halfway built Hokage Tower and complained to the Godime about it. Tsunade brought up a lot of many great reasons as to why this would be the best choice. Luckily, Naruto's flat was one of the first things the village built again because if it wasn't, then they both would have had to share a tent together. The village was also enraged of her stay, so she couldn't live on her own. There would be many assassination attempts. Also, they will be training together because of Naruto's Rinnegan, so they would need to spend as much time together as possible, just in case something unusual happened. Their added time to each other also means they can learn from each other and build good teamwork with one another because they will need it. Plus, Konan felt obligated to stay around the Jinchuriki anyway. Naruto mildly calmlined but realized that everything Tsunade said was true. Konan didn't complain one bit. Her heart actually felt a bit calmer upon that information. It seemed the Sannin trusts Konan to be around Naruto even so far as to live with him. Wasn't Tsunade worried that something would happen? Konan wouldn't have felt entirely comfortable staying in constant sight of the Jinchuriki if they were to share a tent, although, not to say that she wouldn't have minded that either. If she had no choice then it was perfectly fine. It wasn't her first time having to get used to new living arrangements. It was a random thought that crossed her mind, but she still didn't like the idea of not having a room. She had one in Omegakure before battles broke loose in the city, but her place in AIM didn't matter anymore because her life was currently in the Leaf Village protecting the next prophetic child. Of course, she remembered herself being the Omegakure cage and fulfilling the responsibility of keeping the village safe. She actually thought about it a lot more than before, but her mind was made up about several things. The village is in no near danger anytime soon because there is nothing of importance there for the Akatsuki to invade. Another thing that never left her mind was the fact that she was basically kept in Konoha against her will. Yes, she could hold her own against a few powerful shinobi, but the village would only overpower her in the end and win. She also thought about the undeniable will that was passed down to Naruto whenever Nagato saw him eye to eye. That will called for true peace. She almost forgot about her conditional yet unconditional protection to Naruto's well-being. Conditional meaning she would get killed if she didn't follow up in Naruto's training, and unconditional meaning that she wanted to protect Naruto for his passed down will and claiming him to be the true child of prophecy. Mainly, the last part about protecting the boy was her reason for staying. They found themselves beginning to practice in the training grounds. It was no later than 8 in the morning and both ninja realized they needed to remain focused, so they started with practicing on his techniques again. Konan laid herself on the wooden log just like the day before to catch her breath, but didn't have to stay as long. Her recovery was going along rather well and it seemed as if she would be seemingly normal in the next couple of days. Naruto did some early stretches to prepare himself. He was utterly psyched upon learning more about these two techniques. After another breath, Konan got up Agai and looked at the eager blonde. Alright, are you ready? Oh man, are you kidding me? Naruto blurted out with excitement stirring in his voice, I've been waiting since yesterday. She let out a smile that was barely noticeable but returned with her voice, okay, so you know the basic idea as to how to use the Bansho Tenin. Now it is time to teach you how to use the Shinra Tensei. Naruto got into his thinking pose and activated his Rinnegan for the lesson. But before I do that, there are some things I have to tell you about the Rinnegan before we start. She closed her eyes and heaved a sigh. The reason I tell you to activate your Rinnegan is so you can everything I tell you. No, it is not like the Sharingan where you can copy countless jutsu, but it does give you better memory altogether. Do you remember everything that happened yesterday while your Rinnegan was activated? Naruto looked at her for a second and began to think, I don't know. Alright, well then I will help you remember with a simple question. She spoke with slight annoyance but with simplicity. How many times did you use the Bansho Tenin? That's easy, Naruto scoffed. 258 times. Wait a minute, I always lose count when I practice, so I shouldn't have known that. That's exactly what I was trying to tell you. Rinnegan gives you a better memory of everything that happens, the blue-haired woman replied with nonchalance. It also gives you a clearer mind to where you can think rationally in even the most intense of situations. Wow, that's amazing, the blonde said with awe. I see why Nagato was so strong now. Yes, but that does not cure the irrationality that you obtain through anger and rage. If you do not forget that, then you will be fine. Naruto thought about her words for a minute. Anger tended to be a very difficult thing to ignore, since there were times where he couldn't really control himself. Alright, I will try. Good. Since you now know this, I can teach you Shinra Tensei, she replied without much hesitation. Shinra Tensei is a little harder to maneuver for several different reasons. But since I told you why yesterday, we can just start the lesson now. Naruto nodded his head in agreement. Okay, you remember how I told you to compress the chakra in your hand until it becomes invisible? The blonde shook his head again. Well, this time you compress the chakra in your hand to where it becomes unstable. I am pretty sure this part will be a little easier to achieve since you have technically mastered the Bansho Tenin, Konan replied dully, just so that same exact thing you did before except make it to where you synchronize your chakra throughout your whole body while simultaneously unbalancing your chakra in your hand. The Jinchuriki's face fell off from Konan's explanation. You make it seem like it is so easy. The Junin looked at him unimpressed. You said the same thing about Bansho Tenin and yet you have basically completed that move in one day. This one should be no different. His expression changed from one of concern to one of happiness, then without saying a word, he began to try it out, closing his eyes to concentrate. He lifted his hand and put full focus into the move, opening his eyes again only seconds later brimmed with confidence. A faint whisper in the winds alerted something was happening before an explosion erupted out of Naruto's palm, blowing him backwards into a tree. He hit it with much force, causing leaves to shake loose and fall to the ground. Once the momentum ceased, his body slumped over and he did not say a word. Naruto-san, are you alright? Konan asked as she walked over to him. Slight concern etched across her face from Naruto's little stunt while she kneeled down next to the boy. The Jinchuriki brought his face up to match her eye level and began rubbing the back of his head with his hand while laughing sheepishly. Ha. Guess I used too much chakra, huh? A sigh escaped her lips from the immediate laugh he gave her. No, that's not it at all. Your body was not in exact sync with your chakra and it caused you to fly backwards. Look, she replied while lending a hand and helping him up. The reason why I tell you to be in sync is because your body has to withstand the force the expulsion brings, and that means you have to endure the gravitational force it releases. Ooh, the orange-clad ninja answered as if he just figured it out, so just match my chakra level throughout my entire body while doing the technique and I should be able to stay in one place if I do this. Precisely. Hey, alright then, he replied with a determined grin. This time, I know I can do it. The blonde then closed his eyes one last time to concentrate and sync his chakra. He opened them shortly after and held out his right hand again just like he did previously. Once he did that, another whisper in the wind pierced through the air. A mere second later, a strong burst expelled from his hand causing dirt, leaves, and a few sticks to fly away opposite of his position. A hand clap session was heard from Naruto's left once he finished. It made him feel really proud to know that he somehow succeeded in satisfying his teacher and succeeded in basically mastering the move. He turned his head to give her his trademark grin, but light heaves from her direction caused him to stop. He looked over to her and saw her face contorted with anguish in a feeble effort to stop the sudden rush of emotion. She pulled her hands up to her face and began wiping the tears that were continuously falling down her soft cheeks. Her sobs grew more and more uncontrolled as her heaving became irregular. She was clearly distressed, but the question was, what was it about? Naruto though about it for a minute. It was really bothering him to see her look that way. She was in agony and her really didn't know why. Konan-chan, are you okay? Naruto asked as he walked over to her. She still sobbed even louder than before, completely ignoring the blonde's question, which left Naruto to stop in his tracks. He halted his hand from reaching over to her and dropped it to his side. It seemed like this was one of those times where Naruto didn't know what to do. Thinking it was the best choice in the matter, Naruto just turned around and started walking away. He thought that there are just some times when people needed to be alone. His steps faded as she continued lightly sobbing. She went over to a tree and slid her back against the bark all the way to the ground. Her conscience was spinning in all directions, making her feel like she was going insane. It all came crashing down again, consuming her. 888 sextillion 800 quintillion 8 quadrillion 880 trillion 8,888,000. Page break. Naruto paced himself through the streets of Konoha. His mind was somewhere else because he really wasn't watching where he was going. He bumped into a couple of people who, in return, gave angry shouts until they recognized who he was. Once they did, it went from meanness to niceness at the drop of a hat. They began shouting apologies and begging forgiveness for their rude behavior. The blonde merely shrugged it off and told them it was no big deal and walked away. He was too lost in thought to really care what others had to say. He was more concerned about Konan. He's been unusually broody ever since he came home from defeating Nagato. What is wrong with her? She just all of a sudden started crying. The blonde replied to no one as he sat down on a bench. Is it because of him? He started pounding his fist on the bench, forcefully creating cracks on its surface. I don't understand. Naruto. The Jinchuriki looked up upon hearing his name and noticed a figure standing beside him. She carried her usual attire of red with her hitai going around her head, pulling her pink hair up. Oh, hey, Sakura-chan. Hey, I was wondering where you were, the pink-haired girl replied with a smile while taking a seat beside him. What are you doing here? Naruto asked, putting his gaze to the ground. I am just helping rebuild Konoha on the west end and I decided to take a break. What about you? Aren't you usually training or something? It's kind of early for you to be sitting out here. Yeah, I guess you're right, Sakura-chan, the orange-clad boy replied with a smile. Sakura then noticed something strange about her friend. He had that look on his face again. That same look he had when she helped him with Konan. That same look when he couldn't get Sasuke back. A look of guilt. It didn't only appear on his face, but it appeared in his eyes as well when he looked at her. Are you alright, Naruto? The pink-haired girl asked her longtime friend. He only stared at her for a second, then sunk his head a little lower than normal. He knew that Sakura could see through anything. That he tried to attempt, so he answered truthfully, no, not really. Is it about Sasuke? The girl asked him quietly, who only shook his head in disagreement. No, it's about Konan-chan, Naruto responded with a depressed demeanor. Chan. Sakura though perplexed. But knowing that Naruto was troubled at the moment, she let that slide and kept it for later. She's not doing anything to you, is she? Is she trying to change you? Just tell me and all. No, Sakura-chan, it's nothing like that. Well, what is it? Naruto thought about it for a minute. He had to put the right words into what he was about to say, so he looked around the area for a moment, then heaved a sigh and looked into the sky. Well, she was training me today. Right now, I am learning how to use the Rinnegan and the moves that come with it. Rinnegan, she shouted to Naruto wide-eyed. She never knew that Naruto had the Rinnegan. Actually, she hasn't talked to Naruto since they healed Konan. He didn't really talk then either, so nothing was ever really said between the two of them. As of late she had been too busy helping the village restoration to actually give him time of day. That is not to say that she didn't want to see him. When she had breaks, he was never around his usual places where she normally found him, so it couldn't be helped. Yeah, I have the Rinnegan. Nagato gave it to me. Nagato? Who's Nagato? Sakura asked confused. She really wasn't in the loop of things that happened in the last week because of confidential reasons, but it sounded like she was about to get her fill. You know him as Pain, the guy who destroyed the village. The kunoichi gasped at his answer. Pain was some guy named Nagato and he willingly gave Naruto the Rinnegan. That seemed a little too far-fetched in her opinion. There is no way that he could give Naruto that type of responsibility. But then again, Nagato did revive everyone that died after what Naruto said to the man that made him second-guess his reason. Okay. Well, why are you depressed because of Konan? The girl asked him a little curious. She figured now was not the best time to discuss all of this Akatsuki business out in the open since people were still trying to adjust. She didn't really trust the blue-haired Junin either, so she had to get the scoop of what was troubling the young Uzumaki. Naruto sighed softly, but quickly answered, we were practicing today, just like the day before. Nothing was wrong really. Actually, everything was going great. He then grew a moderate grin on his face at the recollection. I learned how to do both of the gravity moves that Nagato knew how to do basically in 2 days, and that is without having to use clones for added training time. Sakura's eyes widened a bit after hearing that. Naruto learned those moves that destroyed the village, moves that require months of training for. There's just no way. This really stumped the pink-haired girl in many ways. First off, Naruto was Naruto. It was not possible for him to learn an entire jutsu in a day, especially since they were very powerful and consumed a lot of chakra. As a matter of fact, it was literally impossible to learn a jutsu in a day. Second, he never even used his Kage Bunshin to help him cut down the training time, which made no sense at all. Did the Rinnegan have something to do with that? She was quickly thrown out of her ruminations as she heard the blonde continue. Just as soon as I finally completed the Shinra Tensei, she started crying. Naruto hesitated as he finished his last statement. It was really bothering him to a degree where it was the only thing on his mind, which was strange. I called her name, but she didn't say anything. Then, I sort of left because I thought that she just wanted to be alone. He then looked at her with pleading eyes. Sakura-chan, I don't know what to do. Why is she crying? The red-dressed girl closed her eyes and pondered the situation. She didn't really know the whole ordeal, so she was a little short on words. Hearing that Konan, an ex-Akatsuki, was crying, she felt like that sort of thing was impossible. But then again, She is human after all. For some reason though, hearing that Naruto left the blue-haired woman alone, really upset her. Actually, that was the first thing that came to her mind when he said that. Why did you leave her? Sakura asked in an annoyed tone. I thought shish. Let me ask you a question, Naruto. Did you want to be alone whenever you cried? Hey, wait the blonde boy was taken aback by what she asked. He tried to rebuttal the question only to be cut off by Sakura again. Even if she was the enemy, she is still just a person like you and me, no matter how hard I don't want to accept it. Naruto tried to say something in Sakura's rant but she overpowered his voice leaving him with nothing but a squeak. Naruto, she is obviously in a state of anguish. She's been forced to live in Konoha against her will and I don't think that is something to easily get over. Even though you did save her life, it's not like she asked you to save her. The girl sat her back to the backrest and heaved a sigh. Honestly, I don't know exactly what's going on in her head, but I do know that if I was in a situation like she was in then I would be the same way. That little outburst really left him speechless. Sakura was right. Naruto didn't have to save her but he did anyway. Not only that, now Konan was forced to live in Konoha. That's right. She can't leave. Ah, damn it. I totally forgot she was forced to stay here. Why didn't I plan this better? I'm such an idiot. He began to pound his fist on his leg in a fervent attempt to recognize his problem. Of course, Konan would be upset about being forced somewhere she doesn't want to live. He was left feeling a little numb. He had to make it up to her somehow, but the question was how was he going to do that? There was nothing that he could do to make her forgive his short-sighted decisions. Honestly, Naruto, Sakura began with her usual bashing on the blonde. I thought you would have grown up by now, but I guess you never really did learn anything, huh? Naruto looked down into his lap once she said that. It was the usual when it came to Sakura. He would always do something wrong and end up hearing his faults and what he did wrong. She was more like a mother scolding her child every time he did something. Yeah, I guess you're right. The pink-haired girl wasn't really expecting that one. He usually tried to back himself up with his answers and usually says something that is irrelevant. It was as if it was actually getting to him. Yeah, you're right, Sakura-chan. I just don't know what to do. Sakura began brooding about it by placing her hand on her chin. The only thing you can do now is apologize to her, although I doubt that will do anything being as how it wouldn't really matter. Naruto sighed and slumped over even more at her declaration. She was really cutting him down. The girl noticed his state and it made her hesitant to say any more. She really wasn't helping him at all and it took her a few seconds to realize it. He probably already knew that he couldn't change anything and she was only adding to the fire. She grinned slightly to try and turn things around. Hey, it's not like you to be so down. Lighten up, she replied while giving him a slap on the back. I'm sure you'll figure it out, Naruto. You tend to figure everything else out on your own, so what makes now any different? You're not going to let something this small affect you, are you? He looked at her from THGE's sudden back slap. She showed solid support for the blonde boy and it made him realize one of the reasons why he liked her. Hey. Yeah, I guess not. That's great to hear, Sakura stated happily. Now, are you going to be depressed all day or are you going to try and fix the problem? His smile widened before it turned into his trademark foxy grin. I'll fix it. Great. Who knows, Naruto? Maybe she could end up falling for you and you both could end up in a kinky relationship, she replied with a mischievous grin. Naruto blanched after that but did a 180 and blushed afterwards. Ah, Sakura-chan, don't say something like that. He then slumped over in embarrassment causing the pink-haired girl to laugh. Sorry, she giggled while waving her hand dismissively and looked at Naruto. However, that gaze slowly changed into a confused look on her face. She didn't know what it was, but something else was different about her Jinchuriki friend. Naruto noticed her odd looks and brought them to question. What is it? Sakura, startled from her eyeing the boy, quickly asked unsure, did you Do something to your hair. The blonde simply stared at her with a similar puzzled expression before answering, no. It's the same as it always has been. Why do you ask? She looked one more time before sighing and producing a smile, it's nothing. Anyway, I guess I'm going to go. The village doesn't build itself, you know. Alright, Sakura-chan, Naruto replied with perplexity. They then bid each other farewell as the pink-haired girl left. After she was gone, his face went blank as he was faced with the challenge of apologizing to his new teammate.